Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be looking at something totally different, and I'm not referring to this backpack or other travel gear because this video still fits in the DOScember theme where a bunch of YouTubers create videos on DOS and DOS based systems. I have a link to the official DOScember playlist in the video description below, as well as all of the other YouTube channels that are participating in DOScember. So in this video, we're going to be talking about a Data General product, the laptop which is included in this case. So let's open her up and see what we have inside, starting at the top compartment where we find a power supply and some documentation. So let's take a quick look. The smart way to get around. So Data General and a leading luggage manufacturer have combined the latest in high-tech design with high-strength materials and construction. Easy to carry, pack, and unload. We have some other documentation here. Let's take a quick peek. So what we saw before was the executive summary. So here we have some additional information on this case. And here we have an actual first view of the computer and the accessories, just so you know where the monitor, the computer, the keyboard is located on this thing. But we've got some room here for an additional battery charger, which we don't have, and some cables. Here we have the AC power supply, which is used to power the laptop. So this is obviously a Data General branded one, 6.4 volts output. So it uses a standard AC input connector and what appears to be a proprietary laptop connector to hook it up to the laptop. But now let's go to the interesting part, and that is of course this laptop that we have here, the Data General 1. Now this is not the first laptop or generally available laptop that Data General produced. Because in 1984, Data General introduced the Data General 1, which is the first complete, truly portable, IBM-compatible personal computer with a full-size LCD display. It featured an Intel 8086 CPU running at 4 MHz, a monochrome LCD display, 11-inch, CGA graphics, 2 internal 3.5-inch disk drives, which was pretty rare for that time, and an internal battery that would last up to 6 to 8 hours. But the laptop, or portable, that I have here is the second revision. It's the Model 2T of the Data General 1. A laptop released in 1987 that takes over a lot of the features of its predecessor, but bumps up the specs somewhat. So let's take a look at what this Data General 1 Model 2T is all about. So this is a Model 2506C. It features 512 kilobytes of RAM, it has 2 floppy drives, it has a floating point unit, and it comes from France. On the bottom side, we also have this small compartment here that holds a coin cell. So this is used to keep track of the system settings and the date and time. The computer comes with this hinge so that we can carry it around more easily. And I actually got this laptop in a local trade from a really nice guy named Kevin. So thank you, Kevin. I promised to make a video of it. It took a while, but here it is. And on the bottom side, we also have the PC speaker. On the left-hand side, there's really not a whole lot to see. We have the power switch here. And as we open up the screen, you can actually see that it goes all the way down. So the hinge mechanism allows for the screen to go almost fully horizontally. On the right-hand side, we see 2 disk drives. And below the second disk drive, we have another compartment. Now this computer doesn't come with a hard drive, so the only storage that we have are those 2 disk drives. So those are both 720 kilobyte capacity disk drives, and they're basically all of the storage that you have. So that means that they will do lots of the legwork in terms of reading and writing data. Below the second hard drive, we have a separate compartment which has an external keyboard connector. But when we open it up, we see that we also have room to slide in some kind of expansion module. And this was used to hook up a internal modem card. On the back here, we can see the actual modem connection, which would have been provided by that particular card. So it has this little plastic thing to act as a cover. What we also have here is kind of this special plasticky thing here, and this is actually used as a PCB extraction tool to allow you to remove PCBs from the expansion slots which are located on the back. Now, in order to get to the two expansion slots, you need to open up these little thumb screws here, and then the little covers go off. And it uses some kind of proprietary mechanism to put expansion cards into the machine. The machine supports a number of expansion cards like external CGA cards, additional I/O cards, and also memory expansion cards. We have a serial port, RS232C, and this is a serial port which isn't 100% compatible with a regular, IBM PC compatible serial port. The computer does feature a standard parallel port, and alongside that we have a dedicated expansion slot for additional memory. Again, it uses a proprietary connector, and there you could hook up a 128 or 256 kilobyte memory module. We have the power input here, so let's plug in our power cable and start up the computer. So let's open up the lid and turn it on. We hear a little beep. I don't have any disks installed in the disk drive now, so let's see what she will do without any disks inserted. And as we start seeing something on the screen, we'll notice that it is doing a memory check. So we have 512 kilobytes of main memory. We hear a little melody and we see that test 11 has failed. And this involves a battery, the coin cell battery, which is dead. Now, when starting this computer without any floppy disks, it will boot into a menu allowing you to do three things. You can go into the System Setup menu to configure various aspects of the system. You can go into the Terminal Emulation menu to hook up this laptop to another system via the serial port, because this has a terminal emulation package built in. Or you can execute some diagnostics. But let's start with the system setup. So in the disk drive configuration, we can configure the number of disk drives that we have, whether or not we have a fixed disk present. So this computer could be equipped with a 10 megabyte hard drive. Unfortunately, I don't have that one here. We can do some backlight screen settings, the various screen display modes. So this is a CGA monochrome display, but we can set it in 40 column mode. We can set it in monochrome mode. We can also toggle the CPU speed. So normally this computer will run at 7.14 megahertz, but we can slow it down to 4.77 megahertz. We can set the keyboard. We can set the parallel and the COM port parameters in this system setup menu. So as I said, this computer has a built-in terminal emulation software, so you don't need to have any disks in order to access it. It allows you to specify various settings like flow control, duplex settings, modem settings. And with it, you can actually just go online, either using your modem or serial cable, and hook it up to an external system. Obviously, I don't have such an external system to hook it up to, so yeah, can't really show you much there. But it is convenient that they have included such an internal terminal emulation package on the computer. Now, from the diagnostics menu, you can execute various tests. The memory test will test your internal 512 kilobytes of RAM. We can also test the two disk drives by inserting a blank disk, and it will do some incremental and random I/O tests on the disk. Now, if I had a fixed disk on this machine, I would also be able to test that, but unfortunately I don't. So now let's start the computer with an operating system, and I have this Microsoft DOS version 3.2, which is Data General labeled. So we're going to be using that to start the computer, and it will just boot into MS-DOS 3.2, as you can see here. Now, because of the dead coin cell battery, it will ask me for the current date and time, but we will fix that afterwards. And then it just drops us into the MS-DOS prompt. Now, regarding the screen, the LCD screen can be manipulated using the keyboard. So by using the command and plus and minus signs, we can play with the backlight settings a little bit. It doesn't make a huge difference, but I noticed that it does make this kind of whining noise as I increase the backlight. Now, using command and page down, page up, we can also change the contrast or brightness of the LCD display, and that actually makes a huge difference. Yeah, this kind of allows you to tweak the LCD screen a little bit, as it does require a brightly lit room in order to function properly. It's definitely not the best of screens. It's not as washed out as on certain old computers that I have already seen, so you can configure it a little bit. Now, the keyboard on this thing is relatively nice to type on. The keys are a little bit smaller than on typical keyboards, obviously due to the space constraints, but some of the keys are very awkwardly placed, like for example these arrow keys here, but also stuff that you need often, like the numlock keys like plus, minus, slash, star. Sometimes I often feel myself searching for certain keys because it just doesn't make any sense where they are located. So take this control key, for example, which is usually placed on the bottom left side next to the Alt key. So if you want to do like a Control Alt Delete, I'm always searching for those keys. Especially the positioning of the arrow keys just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, they're all lined up in one row and it becomes very difficult to manipulate them, especially when you're playing games or if you're using software that you typically use these keys to navigate in. The computer also comes with this virtual numlock of sorts, so you get the numbers here, but then again, I mean, the plus, minus, slash, star sign are very awkwardly placed. So here above the function keys, we have this little label here that we can remove, and that exposes this little button here, and if we press it, we can see that we can open up this little compartment to the left, and that is where the actual battery compartment is. Now, I don't have the battery for this thing, but when this computer was originally sold with a battery and without a fixed disk drive, I mean, it would last up to 6 or 8 hours. And I guess it's possible to create like a new battery cell using NiCad cells, just taping them together and putting them in this compartment. Now, judging from these two terminals here, the battery did start leaking, but luckily the owner removed it before worse damage was done to it. Okay, but now it's time to look at some software, because what are we going to be running on this machine? And I'm going to start with Lotus 123, which is, I think, kind of fitting for a computer like this. So yeah, I can just imagine business people, you know, crunching numbers, entering data in these kind of worksheets, presenting graphs to the management. And it all seems very basic, obviously, now, but I can imagine back in the day when people first started using this type of software that it was kind of mind-blowing that you could, you know, input all of this data and actually visualize that data and present it to somebody who wasn't really familiar with all of these things. Now, DBase is another one of these iconic packages that, you know, were used in the early 80s. A database application allowing you to, you know, create, design database structures, insert data, export to other file formats, include them in other pieces of software. It was kind of de facto standard for database applications back in the day. So yeah, I really find it amusing to start that up again in 2020 and just see how relational database management systems that are still being used today were actually used, you know, in the early 80s. And, you know, the basic concepts of, you know, tables, fields, types, data types, queries are still very much applicable today. So also loaded up Check It just to see what we can find out about the internals of the system. So much of that we already knew. So yeah, 8088 XT class machine. It has a Math Co-Pro, 512 kilobytes of RAM, CGA screen. It has 16K of video RAM, 2 disk drives, a serial and a parallel port. Performance-wise, it is faster than the original IBM PC XT because, this is clocked at 7.14 megahertz, although Check It here sees it as a 6.93 megahertz CPU. And also because of the presence of a Math Co-Pro, under certain conditions, this will definitely be faster. But time for some R&R now. I mean, as a gaming machine, this one doesn't really stand out, particularly because of the nature of the LCD display, the fact that it doesn't display color. It doesn't make for a great gaming experience, obviously. I mean, you can play basic games on it, but faster moving titles like this Grand Prix Circuit game here isn't an ideal fit for this laptop. I mean, because you don't have any colors, I mean, it becomes very difficult to distinguish various aspects on the screen. And because, of the high-speed nature of this game, the LCD display does have a little bit of an issue following the action on the screen. But probably the most annoying thing is, again, the positioning of these arrow keys, which makes it virtually impossible to play games like this on this laptop. And also on other titles like the infamous Alley Cat game that you often see on these kind of retro PCs. I mean, again, given the nature of this LCD display and the quality these types of screens had in that era, it just makes it for a non-optimal experience to play games like that. But that doesn't mean you can't have any fun with a little laptop like this. I mean, certain more high contrast games that don't have this kind of fast-paced action in them, like Tetris, for example, it's pretty playable on a machine like this. It also doesn't rely on these awkward positioned arrow keys, so you can use kind of different keys to move the blocks around. So yeah, that makes it for an enjoyable experience with a game like that. Also love the fact that hitting escape in this game gets you into this kind of fake Lotus 1, 2, 3 screen, so that, as you're playing Tetris in your office, as soon as you see the boss coming around, you just hit escape and your boss will see that you are busy number crunching. And you can also have lots of fun with games like Space Commander on a machine like this. Or Blockout, another nice puzzler from that era. So yeah, that about wraps it up. I mean, this was my introduction video on the Data General 1 Model 2T. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please check out some of my other stuff. If you like this one, please consider giving it a thumbs up, leaving a comment in the comment section below, hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye-bye.